before I share my screen, I just wanted to quickly situate where I think my presentation is going to hopefully provoke some conversation. I think if anyone's familiar with any aspect of what we do, there is a strong emphasis on design. I think we've got a team of designers, a very small team of designers, but we try and produce. We place a strong emphasis and value on things that are beautifully designed, and we make no. I'm sure this audience would entirely back us in making no apology for that. We think that's a really, really important thing. But I'm not actually going to really talk about that aspect of design, the sort of, as it were, the aesthetics of what we do design-wise at Everyone Every Day. I'm going to talk about inclusive design, participatory design, and really sort of design on the basis of equality, how you build infrastructure around design for local people in neighbourhoods. And we think that these are people who are sometimes forgotten in conversations around design. However, I'm really convinced that this particular audience and this particular emphasis, this idea of the role that design plays in placemaking, naturally creates that connection between people, the places they live in, and the infrastructure and skills around design. So I think that's just a fantastic focus for a discussion, and I'm really delighted to be part of it. So I'm going to share my screen. This worked perfectly just a second ago, and can you confirm that it's worked perfectly again? Yes.
Yes, perfect, Nat, thank you.
Brilliant, okay. So I'm going to talk to you about Everyone Every Day. So I work for an organisation called Participatory City Foundation. We're the organisation that was set up to run something called the Everyone Every Day project. Just a word on the different terms you might hear. So Everyone Every Day is the project. Participatory City Foundation is the organisation, and Everyone Every Day is a 5-year research and development project, and these 5 years complete over a decade of research and development into this particular model of participation and participatory infrastructure that we've been looking at and examining and building and testing and evaluating over the past, well, at the end of the 5 years, it'll be about 12, 13 years worth of research and inquiry and sort of design and iteration. So quite a long journey to get to where we've got to. And what is Everyone Every Day? Well, it's 5 years, but it's all about the things that people do in their neighbourhoods and in their communities when they are given the tools to act, and when they're given the tools and the space and the resources to be able to actually implement the things that they want to do. And the images in front of you are images taken from the work that we've been doing in Everyone Every Day, which is based, I should say, in Barking and Dagenham in East London. And these are images which we have, which are from these projects, which are being designed and implemented by local residents in Barking and Dagenham. And they've been doing these now for 3 years as part of the Everyone Every Day project. So we've got about 2 years left to go. When I first started doing these presentations, these sorts of presentations, or talking to the outside world about this project, back 3 years ago when I joined, I had a similar slide, but it was all images from participatory projects from around the world, from different places. So these projects exist around the world, but in Barking and Dagenham, this is the first time where they have been connected to one another through a supportive infrastructure that is focused on how to design, implement, and run a really strong ecosystem of projects in a place. So it's a really fantastic thing to be able to actually show you, as you can see on this screen, the real sort of fruits of this work 3 years in. So this is now a network of many thousands of people, about 7,000 to 8,000 people in Barking and Dagenham, and also about 170, 180 projects which have been developed by local people in Barking and Dagenham. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about how that has been done and the role that design plays in that happening. So just very, very quickly, and I do apologise for any of the audience from different parts of the world for whom this may be quite UK specific, this slide in front of you, but I'm going to try and present it in a way that I hope makes it a bit clearer that it's how it might fit into different contexts. So we see this participation culture thing as different, as distinct from many other forms of support which exist in places for the if you're a resident of a neighbourhood and you're asking yourself the question, how can I make a difference in my local area? How can I implement some of the ideas I want to? How can I make change happen in my community? In the UK, and I think broadly in many of our communities across the world, there are different models and different frameworks and different sorts of institutional arrangements which you can draw on. We have the model which is about representative democracy, or representative bodies which reflect the wishes and desires of local people. That's a very tried and tested model. It exists in different forms in many communities. In the UK, we've got the charity model, which is about people giving their time and giving their resource to a good cause. That model exists in all sorts of different forms around the world. But it inherently has something about the difference between people who need and people who are providing, which achieves a huge amount of stuff, but it's also slightly problematic. It imagines a difference between those two parties. There's the challenge model, which is about how you can make a difference through lobbying, petitioning, making a noise in a place. Quite a lot of that going on in our communities at the moment. There's the power of our money. We can make a difference by the things that we choose to consume and our wealth, but that's inherently an unequal model because some people will have more resources than others. And then we have a whole range of ways in which you can associate with others, formally or informally, to make a difference. And many member-based organisations are drawn on this basis. But there is a gap, and that gap is about what we have termed participation culture. And participation culture is the things. A helpful way, I think, of understanding this is it's the things that people want to do and want to share for not because it's necessarily not because it's a massive cause that they believe in, or because they're really angry about something, or because it will make the place a richer, more wealthier place. It's just the practical things they want to share with their neighbours that end up making a difference in their local areas. So this is very much about the practical ways in which people can do stuff, but also can support one another. And it's very much about co-production and co-design. These two concepts are absolutely at the heart of this idea of participation culture. And the difference when looking at this slide is that there is supportive infrastructure that exists in the UK context around every one of these other models, but there is no supportive infrastructure around participation culture. And we think that Everyone Every Day is the first example of its type anywhere in the world. I mean, I'd love to be corrected on that, where there has been an attempt made to build infrastructure and institutional arrangements around this idea of participation and participation projects. So I'm going to describe a bit more about how that works. So this is, and I apologise in advance for what is going to be a very oversimplified version of what we do, and I will definitely share some links to more detailed information which you can gather. But very basically, the work we do is is about two different things. One is a supportive platform infrastructure, which bears a number of features, and the function of that platform is to create this thing which we call the participatory ecosystem. And the platform is fairly fixed, predictable. It's got some, as I say, some key features which are very important within it. But the ecosystem is a living, breathing, changing network and connected sort of a nexus of people, projects, ideas, organizations, local organizations that are always sort of coming into being, perhaps sometimes dropping out of being, but ever changing and interrelated group of these sort of activities, projects, people, networks. So the function of the platform is to enable this ecosystem to come into being. And the way it does this is through what we call this co-production or co-design process, which sits at the heart. And there are three key features which I want to draw out of this, which I think are relevant to today's discussion. So the first feature, if you go and look at any of our material, you will see this idea that within neighbourhoods, and currently we're operating within 5 specific neighbourhoods in Barking and Dagenham, which itself is quite a large borough in London, about 220,000 people. And you know, it's quite densely populated, but not densely populated like other parts of London. It's got quite a big suburban sort of feel to large parts of the borough. But we have created a network of open access project incubator spaces, which are exactly what they sound like. They are, you know, if you're a resident of the borough, you can simply rock up to one of these places, the doors open, or it certainly was until COVID hit. But these places are open, they're accessible, they are, we hope that they are inviting, optimistic, exciting places where you're seeing things happen. But the function of these spaces is really purposeful. It's about drawing people into conversations about the things they want to see happen in their neighborhoods. It's about identifying their own skills, experience, things they want to share, things they can bring to this ecosystem. And it's about connecting them up with existing opportunities that exist in their neighborhood. So really, really strong emphasis placed on open access spaces which are practical in nature, and serve as the function of which is to get projects going and ideas going. The second is a team that, I mean, I'm hugely proud of the team we have in Everyone Every Day. They're extraordinary, but they are they come to Everyone Every Day from a whole host of very, very diverse backgrounds, many of which are unsurprisingly design related. So we've got ceramicists and graphic designers and project managers and digital media people and you know, geeks who know about particle physics and also, you know, CNC machines. So there's a lot of that sort of expertise that has come into the pot at Everyone Every Day. But fundamentally, they're trained in a particular methodology, a particular design methodology, which is around, which bears two key features. One is what we call them our inclusivity principles, and there are 15 of these inclusivity principles, which I won't go through in detail here today. But they are fundamental to everything that we design at Everyone Every Day. And essentially, they are about ensuring that every opportunity that emerges from this co-production, co-design process meets, it's not, we don't think of them as criteria or a standard, but we want this ecosystem to overall, if you look at the ecosystem as a whole, it needs to bear these 15, the hallmarks of these 15 inclusivity principles. And they're things like they've got to be there. Some of them are really straightforward. The opportunities have to be really close to people's homes, so they don't have to travel long distances to get to them. They've got to be designed for, families with small children, as well as people who are in wheelchairs and elderly and who might struggle and might have a variety of needs like that. They need to be optimistic and aspirational. They need to be things that people, in other words, that people want to do. They need to be free. People need to be able to access these without paying. So they need clearly to be appropriate and designed for the diversity of people who live in Barking and Dagenham, and indeed in any community. So they can't be, we don't do anything that relates to religion. We don't do anything that relates to specifically targeted at people with specific groups of needs. By contrast, we seek to create opportunities which are inclusive of people who come from those different perspectives, but are not designed specifically for any part of that community. So this design methodology is really, really important. And the other element which is really, really important is that, skilled though this team is, and mad skills though they all have, they are the fundamental relationship. I would hope, and we think from our evidence, that the experience of residents participating in this co-design process feels very equal. So we're not talking about people bringing an idea to a group of sort of designated experts who then turn it into something amazing. We're talking about a process which is equal. It comes from a perspective of equality, and it includes those residents absolutely intrinsically in that design process. It really tries to recognise the value. Yes, sorry, Katie.
Really sorry. I just want to prompt you just to say that we've just got about 4 minutes left.
Oh my God!
Sorry to interrupt.
Right, I'm going to rattle through it. I'm so sorry. I get a bit too excited. Okay. Final element is about resources. So in addition to all of this stuff, people need access to the tools to act. Lots of this stuff has a very practical focus. So people need spaces, they need materials to run projects, they need, we've got a warehouse where there are there's a fabric workshop, there's a semi-industrial kitchen, there's a CNC cutter, wood workshop, there's a ceramics workshop. So providing in a free to access way, access to these tools to act is an equally important part of this. So that's an overview of the project. The idea is that it's coded into people's neighborhoods. So you design this to fit into people's neighborhoods. They don't have to go to one place to access this. You can fit different aspects of this platform. You can retrofit it into many of the spaces that already exist in our communities. And we're doing a lot of that work in Barking and Dagenham. And from the residents' perspective, what this begins to look like is that on their streets and highly accessibly to them, you begin to see on their streets, there are just this host of exciting, different practical projects that they can get involved with. And these projects allow them to get involved in a very intensive way. If they've got loads of time on their hands, they can lead these projects, they can just participate. Or if they're people who are very busy or and who don't have lots of time and are managing very, very different competing things in their lives, they can simply participate in a very sort of light touch way. And these range from, dropping into a place for just for a catch-up, tea and toast, to really quite intensive business programs structured around cooperative and collaborative business models. So that's what it should look like and feel like from residents' perspective. And as I say, our evidence is showing quite clearly that in very, very many cases, this is exactly what it's being experienced like for participants. So I wanted to, this is a horrendously complicated slide, but it describes something about the outcomes that we are measuring through participation. And because I've used all my time speaking about other things, I'm going to really quickly summarize this for you. But this basically starts from the point that the inclusive participation at the heart of this model isn't just a nice thing. We think there's a strong hypothesis, and we're measuring this in practice. So we've got evidence now to back this up. This actually results in really, really significant outcomes for a borough if you do this at scale. So scale is really important, but if you do this at scale, you really do begin to see changes to neighbourhoods, changes to people's health and well-being. You begin to give people different options other than benefits to sort of keep their families afloat. They can begin to access the things they need without accessing the benefits or social security systems. And you begin to see these benefits, you begin to see these outcomes accumulate across a borough. So really, really significant outcomes. In other words, this is something which should be, this should be a part of the collective infrastructure of all of our cities and our towns and places. That's our very strong thought. And this is a slide which just shows you, gives you a few indications, which you can look at in detail when I share the presentation afterwards. But this is all drawn from our report from last year, which tells you about the scale of the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. Ultimately, just to point out, just so you're aware of where we're trying to head, that number of 6,000 plus participants, which is the number we achieved at the end of year 2, we are looking to build infrastructure that will push that number to something like 20,000 at the end of year 5, with a corresponding increase in all the other aspects of what that means: the number of projects being developed, the number of participation opportunities that creates, the number of collaborative and cooperative businesses which emerge from the process. So that's an indication of the sort of scale that we're looking to reach and where we're looking to head with the projects over time. So Katie, I think that's my final slide. I apologise that it's such a rapid run through. I'm really happy to answer questions. I'm really looking forward to the discussion in the breakout groups. And obviously, if you've got any other questions that for me outside of this event, I'd love to hear from you. Please do contact me. All my details are on this slide, and I'll share the presentation with you after this event.
Fantastic, Nat. Thank you so much. I'm amazed that you managed to pack in all of that information in 20 minutes, because it's clearly an incredibly complex and multi-layered project. So really fascinating to hear all about it. Now there are some questions coming up in the chat. I'm just going to choose the first one that I've seen here, which is, I think, from Maya. Super interesting and exciting project. I wonder what the most challenging parts of working on this have been. Ooh.
I mean, there've been loads of challenging parts to this, and I think probably the best summary of those is that we've been building this thing. This hasn't really been done before, so we think we're the first project to do this, and so we've been both building an organisation and all the boring stuff that goes with that, much of which is that's my boring job, is to do all that stuff. So all the governance, all the finance, all the doing that, plus recruiting a team and training them in this method, plus delivering the research and development outcomes of the project, and doing so in a way that is, we're not implementing something that it's not like there's a blueprint which already exists. We are iterating and developing as we go, and that's been a really, really complicated thing to do. I mean, it's been wildly exciting. Honestly, I've done various different things in my career. This is just a really exciting project to be working on, and so I think there's lots of interesting insights into, I believe there's lots of reflections for funding and local, the way that local authorities work with this stuff, which I think I'd love to see more research and development partnerships like this created around a whole host of different aspects of what we do. But fundamentally, it's about building something that aims for scale, but starting from scratch has been very, very challenging.
Yeah, I bet. And in your answer there, you touched on a few things that are coming up in the chat as questions. Funding has been a big question that people have asked, and then also about you know, how you've learned. Has there been conflict, and have there been things that have gone wrong that you've learned from?
Nothing's gone wrong. It's been completely plain sailing. So on the funding, we've got funding which is we're grant funded for this research and development period, and that means that our funders have bought into the overarching research aims, and they've signed up for 5 years, which is, you know, I've done work in communities before. 5 years funding of this type is really, really unusual, so we're very lucky to have that. And it's funding that is at scale. You know, we have the overall cost, the overall value of our grants is something like £6.8 million over 5 years, and in fact, you know, that's not counting a capital grant that we've used to kit out the warehouse element of what we do. So we have really significant funding, and our funders have collaborated. It's quite a unique partnership in my experience, where they've pooled their funding. They've sort of hands off. They're not funding a specific element. They've all signed up to the same reporting metrics and timescales, which is an unusual thing in and of itself. So there's some quite interesting innovations in the funding model, which I think might be relevant to people here. In relation to things that have gone wrong, we have, I mean, there's a huge number of things that we tried and didn't work properly. We started off with a different model, for example, in the number of people that we thought needed to be in our shops. We have project designer roles in our shops. Shops are the open access project incubator spaces, which I referred to. We call them shops. We started off with a model that saw 2 people in there, and in fact, that very, very quickly became apparent that wasn't sufficient. We started off with a far too narrowly defined concept of what the business sort of thing layer needed to be on top of this. You know, we support the development of collaborative and community and cooperative businesses. And that we under-resourced that significantly, and that became apparent to us over time. And then there's a whole host of things where we have not managed necessarily always. I've described inclusivity principles. I've described equality of design, and there are some real tensions in that. With at the same time, we want to help people, support people to create things which have value, which are high quality, which you know, and yes, have a degree of you know, are beautiful. We like that. We think that that's important because it actually creates a narrative about a place. A place like Barking and Dagenham really needs that. And sometimes there's a bit of tension in that. It's not just an open-ended platform for people to do literally whatever they want. There are some of these sort of we work with people to create things which are high quality, and that sometimes produces some challenges.
Thanks, Nat. I can imagine from your programme being so you know, over the long term, that you're continually learning and reviewing this as a team. It sounds like you've got a really good team there, and also your participatory approach with all of the community. In fact, that's part of your processes, I can imagine.
Yes, absolutely.
I've got one more question, and then we'll go to the breakouts. I've got time for a short question, but I can see one here that's quite interesting, so it might be a bit challenging. But thinking about the scale of outcomes, this is from Emily Davey. Thinking about the scale of outcomes, do you think we should be taking a wider place locality approach to deliver change rather than focusing on individual projects?
100%. 100% yes. That's
what you're doing.
The idea is that you create something which isn't reliant on the success or failure of an individual project, because some of the I mean, again, I can geek out on this. I love, you know, but some of the analysis about what goes wrong. There are fantastic participatory projects models which exist across the world. You know, we haven't created, none of these projects are innovative or new things in and of themselves. You know, the overall platform is a new thing, but in analysing what tends to go wrong with projects in other places, why they sometimes struggle, or why they need to change something fundamental in themselves in order to survive, which amounts to the same thing. Basically, came to the conclusion that that any model which focuses specifically on individual projects is inherently limited. That's not that it definitely will fail, but it's limited because it relies so much on extraordinary people in our communities who are going to sort of keep these projects going. It relies on heroes, and any system which relies, the majority of us aren't heroes. The majority of people in communities are getting on with their lives, trying to make ends meet, and don't have huge amounts of time, resource, energy, and maybe don't have the confidence and skills and networks and resilience to really drive change in that way. So the question is, how can you create infrastructure which doesn't rely on the individual projects or the individual heroism of people, but instead is focused on creating an environment which is incredibly encouraging of many, many projects to develop, and isn't reliant on the success or failure of, isn't dependent on the success or failure of any one of those projects, or indeed on any one individual coming or going or getting ill or, you know, leaving a place. So that's
it sounds so empowering and resilient as well. Just creating it in that way. Nat, thank you. I think everybody, there's so much in the chat, many people thanking you and just saying how fascinating it is. And I think everybody wants to find out more. So maybe we'll be inviting you back for a longer session. So thank you so much.